Hi there, BPers. This is Tracy Royce for Bigger Pockets, and this week I wanted to go through a fourplex that I was looking at and go through the deal analysis with you. So let's dig right in. So I found this one through MLS, and there was a lot of things that really caught my eye at first. I thought the asking price of $175 was high, but I liked the mix of the 2-bedroom, 1-bath, the fact that each of them was 660 square feet, individually metered for electric, there was no HOA. I love the area of town where it's at. The rents were $495 on average per unit, and my goal was to make about $300 to $400 a month. It works for me. Some of you might require some of more, some of you might go for less, but for me, that was my aim. This is a snapshot of the listing, and this just shows exactly what I was talking about on the last screen of the mix. What's more important is the income and expenses provided by the owner, and if the listing agent goes through and actually enters them, can give you a quick snapshot of a rough estimate of the financial breakdown. So going through that stuff, the one thing that caught my eye, unfortunately you can't see it on the snapshot, was the fact that it looked like there was a really high water bill. I asked it because it shows here the owner pays water, sewer, trash, and then the tenant would just pay the electric. I asked the listing agent about it, and he didn't know off the top of his head, but of course, you know, once we went under escrow, I'd be provided with all the financials. So, and he did say that there was some wiggle room in the asking price, so I was interested, and we decided to move forward. Now with the comps, what I was seeing is that they were between 160 and 170. It stayed fully rented. That area in particular has a really good rental market, and all of those had been updated as well. This one I think had been updated in the last 2 years, and I love the fact that I basically just would have to close on it and take over and not have any repairs to do. So we move forward, and title report looked great. The management lease, I wasn't going to use a property manager. If you can do it yourself and run it effectively and not have it run you, you know, in some cases that makes the most sense. In other cases it doesn't, and having a property manager and managing them can be better for you. The utilities did actually end up throwing me off though. So when I talked to the utility company, what ended up being the average over the last 2 years was about $7,000 for the water, and keep in mind that that's something that I would have to pay, the owner would have to pay. So if you break that down, that's about $583 a month, or $145 per unit. Now the units are only 660 square feet and there's 1 bath, so I'm like, what the heck is going on here? It just seems like it's unusually high. Well, so once I got the leases, it started to make more sense. So what they had done, because I looked a little bit deeper and I found the MLS listings, and it looks like they had filled the last 2 units with larger families, and they had been on the MLS for a while. And so they ended up renting them out to families of 5. So in 2 of the units there were 5 people apiece, and then in the other 2 units there were 4 people apiece. Now, what ends up happening is that if you have families in units and you have a small multifamily, is normally, you know, a single person or a couple that doesn't have children isn't necessarily going to want to live in a small complex where there's a lot of children. It just is what it is. So what my guesstimate was is the fact that they ended up renting to these other families because the other 2 units were filled with families as well. So that could be really difficult to try to, you know, if you're trying to occupy them, you cannot discriminate based on familial status, but all I'm saying is that couples or single people without children aren't necessarily going to want to live around or in small complexes where there's large families. So for whatever that's worth, it just is what it is. So what it comes down to is the fact that with 18 people living in like 2,600 square feet, I just could not get over the fact that I would be paying for 18 people to take showers, take baths, wash their hands, wash their dishes, wash their clothes, all this stuff, and they could use the water as much as they wanted without ever having to think twice about it. And then I would be sitting on the other side of it having to pay for all of it regardless. So I just did not see a way of having that make any sort of financial sense. at that high of a rate, and it's the occupancy status, which you can't really do much about because you have to honor the leases and you can't discriminate. I mean, there's things in Arizona that you can only have so many people in a room for children, but you know, that's my state and not necessarily yours. And for this example, I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. So here's the annual property operating data breakdown. Just to go through this quickly, if I stuck with my price of 165, put 20% down, closing costs, the gross scheduled income for $495 a piece times 4 units gets your monthly income times 12. I accounted for a 10% vacancy rate. I don't like taking that contingency out. There was no other ways to make income on the property, like vending machines, washer dryer units that are coin operated, these sorts of things. Now for the operating expenses, that counts for water, taxes, insurance, maintenance and repairs. I only did $1,500 since it was just redone, but you still have to put something in there. Local taxes or fees just for having a rental property. So all this stuff, you know, just takes away from what your scheduled income is. Beyond that, so you take your debt service, which is the loan amounts that you would have to pay. Cash flow before taxes is about $2,000. Then you still have to pay taxes on top of that. So what this shows is even at 20% down, you'd only still be making around $800 a year, which is about $70 a month. So replacing the roof, water bill goes up, anything changes, I mean, you're basically breaking even. And the stuff that's causing you the most expenses at this point right now, without having to do any repairs, is not going to necessarily get any better. So for like a minute, I asked, you know, could we lower the sales price enough to the point where it made sense? Could we install low flow shower heads, faucets, that sort of stuff? Could we subsidize the water fees with some sort of you know, monthly water fee to the tenants? Could we raise the rents? But the only thing is they were paying what they could afford, and we couldn't. You can't raise the rents enough just because you want to cover your fees. I mean, it kind of just is what it is. So at that point, I mean, it would have taken a $25,000 discount off the asking price. So it would have taken a sales price of $150,000, and the water bill being like $3,000 to $3,500 to get me to where I could actually make $300 or $400 a month. So for me, it just didn't make sense. I think what the current owner owns it at could probably make sense. But other than that, there's just not much that you can do to get it to a point where you can really have it make sense from the get-go. So I backed out of the deal. I chose not to move forward and pay for an appraisal or inspection. There really is no reason to. If you find properties that have disrepair or have mismanagement or out-of-state owners, these things can actually work to your benefit, because then you have a stronger negotiating power to take certain things, you know, put them back in line, reduce costs, reduce overhead, these sorts of things, and get to cash flow. My point is with this one, is there isn't much that you can do about water usage when you have 18 people living in 2,600 square feet. You can't just kick them out. And even if you magically were able to and legally able to, you're not necessarily going to attract, you know, a couple that wants to live around other families. So I backed out of the deal. Listing agent was super cool about it. He understood. But in any case, the conclusion is that I didn't try to make it work, and you can't always get the full story just from the advertisement. So sometimes you just have to go under escrow to understand if the deal's actually going to work or not. But the silver lining is that I was glad I backed out of that opportunity, because almost immediately another deal showed up from a different source, and we closed on that and kept our money moving, and that one was a slam dunk. So I would love to hear from you guys to know if you have had a deal that something quirky showed up during the escrow that just nearly killed the deal. Leave your comments below, and if you like this, please share it with your friends or share it on the social networks, if I could talk. And signing off is Tracy Royce, for no reason whatsoever, holding bolt cutters and glasses in the aisles of Lowe's. And this is Tracy Royce for Bigger Pockets.